A young boy of 9 years sits alone in a crowded gym on family day. His eyes locked on the door that never opens. His name is never called. Whispers fill the air. Hope fades with every minute, until one final creak of the gym door changes everything. A pair of worn-out boots steps into the light, and what happens next will silence the crowd and change a school forever. If you are new to the channel, then please subscribe to the channel and like the video and tell us where are you watching from. Now let's jump into the story. The gym at West Hill Elementary buzzed with noise. Colorful streamers stretched from wall to wall. Balloons floated above clusters of smiling families. And a small stage had been set up near the front where kids lined up to introduce their guests. It was Family Honor Day, a celebration where students brought someone they looked up to, someone they called family. Some stood with moms in nurse uniforms, others with dads in work shirts or dress coats. And everywhere, there was laughter, hugs, and proud applause. But in the back row, away from the lights and noise, sat a boy named Jamie Ross, 9 years old, quiet and wide-eyed. His jeans were pressed, his collar neatly buttoned. And in his hands he held nothing but a pencil he had forgotten to return to class. He sat still, barely blinking, eyes fixed on the double doors at the side of the gym. The ones people entered through, the ones he was still hoping might open. Keen, his teacher, walked by checking names and lineups when she reached him. She smiled softly and bent down. "Jamie, sweetheart, do you have a guest with you today?" Jamie shook his head once, not looking up. "No, ma'am," he whispered. "Just me today." She gave his shoulder a gentle pat and moved on. Not wanting to make him feel worse, Jamie took a breath and kept staring at the doors. The same way he had since the assembly began near the front. A group of boys giggled and whispered behind their hands. One of them nudged another and pointed back at Jamie. "Bet he made it up," the first boy said. "He probably just says he has someone. But nobody ever shows up," another one added. "He's always making stuff up." Jamie heard them. He heard every word. His ears turned red, and his heart sank lower into his chest. He looked down at the floor and picked at the frayed edge of his sleeve. "He's real," he mumbled so low even he could barely hear it. "He just can't be here." His hands clenched tighter. His feet tapped quietly beneath the chair. And inside his chest it felt like something was breaking. But he didn't cry, he didn't run, he didn't even look away. Because Jamie had learned that standing tall, even when your heart hurts, is sometimes the bravest thing you can do. Mom used to say that, before she passed away last spring. She'd been a firefighter, strong and brave and always running toward the trouble instead of away. She used to wear a patch on her jacket shaped like a flame inside a heart. Jamie remembered how safe he felt when he saw her walk through a crowd. That jacket made her easy to spot. She always showed up for him, remembered her last words clearly. "Show up, Jamie, even when it's hard." So that's what he did. He showed up. Even if he had to sit alone an hour past. Names were called. Applause echoed. Kids beamed as they waved their families on stage. But the chair next to Jamie stayed empty. The doors didn't open, not even once for him. And though his legs itched to run outside and disappear, he sat still staring, still hoping, still imagining someone might come through. Just then, the gym doors creaked. The sound sharp and sudden in the laughter-filled room. Heads turned. Conversations paused. Even the balloons seemed to stop moving. A man stepped in, tall, thin, with gray in his beard and a jacket that looked faded with time. He didn't wear a uniform. No suit or badge or special title, just a jacket with an old, stitched patch on the shoulder and heavy brown boots that echoed with every step across the gym floor. Jamie blinked. Unsure at first, the light behind the man made it hard to see, but when their eyes met, Jamie gasped. His body moved before his mind caught up. He ran, weaving through chairs and rows of students, faster than he had ever run in gym class, and launched himself into the man's arms. The man caught him with a soft grunt and wrapped both arms around Jamie tight. The way you hold someone you've missed too much. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. Jamie just buried his face into the jacket and held on, breathing in the scent of forest and dust and something familiar. Jim went quiet. Not out of confusion, but out of something heavier. Something. Relmer's Keen paused mid-step. The principal, Mr. Alden, cleared his throat and walked toward the microphone. He smiled politely at the man and leaned in. "Thank you for visiting," he said, "but please remember, this is a school event, and we aim to keep things orderly and safe for all students." The words hung in the air like cold mist. Jamie didn't understand them, not yet, but he felt the shift, felt the way the room suddenly held its breath. Man looked up, eyes steady, and didn't let go of Jamie. He stood calm and tall, like a mountain in a storm, not saying a word. Not stepping back. Jamie looked up too, not afraid anymore, just watching, waiting, wondering if this was the moment everything would change again. And somewhere inside him, despite the hurt, a new feeling started to grow, not just hope, but something stronger, something like pride. The man's boots thudded gently against the polished gym floor, each step slow, careful, like he wasn't sure if he was allowed to be there. His coat was old, with a small tear near the elbow and a patch sewn on the shoulder, shaped like a flame curled inside a heart. It wasn't bright, not flashy like a uniform, but it meant something. It carried his historic patch once belonged to Jamie's mother, and the man wearing it had once stood beside her. Not in war, but in wildfire, not in uniform, but in service. His name was Tanner Gray, and he hadn't seen Jamie in nearly 5 years. Not since the funeral. Not since he promised Jamie's mom he'd check in if anything ever happened to her. Waited too long. He knew that life had gotten messy. Grief made it hard to face promises, and by the time he finally picked up the phone, there was no one left to answer. So when he heard about Family Honor Day from an old neighbor, he found the jacket, packed his truck, and drove across 2 counties. Unsure of what he'd find, what he found was a boy, sitting alone, trying not to look like he was waiting for someone. And the moment their eyes met, Tanner knew he'd made the right choice. His hug hit him like a wave, small arms locking around his middle, face buried in the jacket that smelled like pine and thyme. Tanner didn't say a word, just wrapped the boy in his arms and stood still, letting the crowd watch if they wanted. He wasn't there for them. The gym was quiet now. Whispers had stopped, the laughter faded. All eyes on the man in the boots and the boy who finally looked like he belonged. But then came the voice over the mic again, soft but clear. The principal, Mr. Alden, stepped forward and offered a tight smile. "We thank all our guests for coming," he said, glancing at Tanner. "But we do ask that family members check in at the front and remain seated for the duration of the event." Tanner looked at him, calm, respectful, but unmoving. Jamie held tighter, sensing the shift. He didn't understand all the rules, but he knew the tone. Something cold, something distant. "He's my family," Jamie said suddenly, loud enough for people to hear. "He knew my mom." The words hung in the air like music played wrong. Uncertain and brave, Alden hesitated, looking between the boy and the man. "Of course," he said carefully, "but we do have guidelines, and we want to make sure the space feels peaceful for all our students." Tanner finally spoke, his voice low and even. "I'm not here to make noise," he said. "I came because the boy who used to smile doesn't anymore, and I figured today was as good a day as any to remind him he matters." There was a long pause. Some parents shifted in their seats, unsure what to do. Others stared, lips pressed into thoughtful lines. A few kids blinked at Tanner like they were seeing something they didn't expect. Not a soldier, not a police officer, but someone just as brave. In the corner of the room, Mr. Dawson, the old custodian, leaned on his broom and watched. His hand rested gently on a medal pinned to his faded work shirt. He'd never spoken during these events, never needed to. But now he took a step forward and said, "Let the man speak." Mrs. Keen looked up too, her hands clasped in front of her. "I think he should," she said quietly with another voice. Lena, the student whose sister sent postcards from deployment, stood up near the back. "He's the first one who came for Jamie," she said. "That counts." It spread like fire on dry grass, slow then fast. One by one, hands went up. Heads nodded, feet stood, not out of anger, not in protest, but in something older, something deeper, a need to do what felt right. Alden stepped back, unsure now. The microphone was still in his hand, but he no longer held the room. Tanner moved forward, gently guiding Jamie to sit beside Mrs. Keene. Then he reached for the mic, adjusted it once, and looked out at the rows of young faces, small hands folded in laps, wide eyes watching. "My name's Tanner Gray," he said, voice steady. Jacket creased, boots quiet now. "I'm not a father. I'm not a war hero, but I served, and I remember what it means to have someone wait for you." He paused, glancing at Jamie, who looked back with open eyes. "I knew Jamie's mom," he continued. "She ran into fire when others ran out. She saved lives and never asked for credit. All she wanted was for her boy to grow up, knowing he was never forgotten." His voice didn't rise, it didn't shake. It just filled the space like wind through tall grass. "I couldn't make it to birthdays, or holidays, or even the day we lost her, but I'm here now," he said, "and I'll keep coming. As long as this boy still remembers who his mother was, and who she believed he could become." The silence after his words wasn't empty. It was full of something warm, something true. Jamie didn't cry, he didn't need to. He just reached out and held Tanner's hand, and in that moment, no one saw an old man in boots and a jacket. They saw a promise kept. The gym was still quiet after Tanner spoke, but it wasn't the kind of silence that comes from awkwardness. It was the kind that follows a truth so clear and so human. No one dares break it right away. Jamie still sat beside Mrs. Keene, holding Tanner's hand, his small fingers wrapped around rough knuckles and old scars. There was no smile on his face yet, but something had shifted in his eyes. Something like light returning after a long storm. A few parents near the back began to clap. Slowly at first, then more followed. It wasn't loud, it wasn't rushed, just steady and full of meaning, and soon the whole gym seemed to join in. Even the students who didn't quite understand what had just happened felt that something important had. Jamie looked up and scanned the room, expecting people to turn away, to go back to their own business. But instead he saw heads nodding, hands over hearts, eyes soft with something close to respect from the far end of the gym. Mr. Dawson, the janitor who had worked at Westhill for more years than most teachers, stepped forward. He walked slowly, but firmly, broom still in hand, and stopped near the microphone stand. Tanner stepped back respectfully, and Mr. Dawson placed his broom to the side and looked out at the students. "A long time ago," he said in a low voice, "I wore a patch too, not like this man's, but one that meant something to me." He touched his shirt gently, right where an old military badge used to rest. "And let me tell you, it's not the uniform that makes someone brave. It's showing up when you're needed most." The gym remained quiet, but this time it felt like everyone was leaning in, listening without being told to. Even Mr. Alden, standing by the office door, watched with arms crossed but eyes more thoughtful. Then Beforley stood next, her notebook still tucked under her arm, her voice clear and steady. "My sister sends me letters from overseas. She always signs them, 'Love, your stubborn hero.' I used to think she meant stubborn like annoying." She gave a small shrug. "But maybe she means the kind of stubborn that doesn't give up on people." She turned to look at Jamie. "Kind of like you." Jamie's cheeks turned red. But this time it wasn't shame, it was something softer. Something like pride warming his skin. Most students began to whisper to their teachers, asking if they could share something too. One boy named Jordan stepped forward and said his uncle raised him when his parents couldn't. Another girl named Emmy talked about her grandma who taught her how to fix things when they broke. And then a little boy no one expected. Quiet Nico from the back row said his big brother stayed home from college every weekend just to walk him to the park. Each voice added to the room like footsteps echoing down a hallway. Each one soft but steady, growing louder in their togetherness. Each story different, but all sharing the same root. Someone showed up when they needed it most. Jamie looked around and saw the crowd not as a sea of strangers anymore, but as people with their own stories, their own hurts, and their own quiet heroes. For the first time in a long time, he didn't feel so different. Ms. Keene smiled and placed a hand gently on Jamie's shoulder. "You helped open a door today," she whispered. "Sometimes that's all it takes." The principal, Mr. Alden, cleared his throat and walked back toward the center of the gym. He held the microphone but didn't speak right away. His eyes moved across the students, the parents, the teachers, and finally landed on Tanner and Jamie. "I believe in peaceful spaces," he said slowly, "and I believe in following rules. But I also believe we just saw what peace really looks like. And it isn't always quiet." A small murmur of agreement moved through the room like a breeze. Through trees, Jimmy leaned over to Tanner, voice soft. "You think Mom would have liked today?" Tanner gave a slow nod. "Your mom would have been the first one to clap," he said, "and probably the last one to stop." At the end of the assembly, instead of rushing out like usual, parents stayed behind. They shook Tanner's hand. Some gave him thanks, others shared their own stories. A woman with tear-filled eyes said her brother was a firefighter too. A man in a baseball cap said he used to carry the same kind of patch on his coat, and now it was framed in his hallway. Jimmy felt hands pat his shoulder, kind eyes meet his own. Even the boys who had whispered earlier now looked at him with something new in their expression. Not pity, not doubt, but maybe something close to understanding. As the crowd began to thin and the noise returned to its usual pace, Tanner knelt beside Jamie and said, "I've got something for you." He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small patch, just like the one sewn on his own shoulder. Jamie took it with both hands, staring at the edges and colors, his fingers tracing the threads. "This was your mom's," Tanner said. "She left it with me, told me to pass it on when the time was right." Jamie looked up at him, eyes big and bright. "Is it time now?" Tanner smiled. "I think so." Mrs. Keene helped Jamie pin the patch to his backpack, right at the top where everyone could see it, and as they walked out of the gym, Tanner's boots tapping alongside Jamie's sneakers, the echoes left behind weren't just sounds on the floor, they were lessons carried quietly from one heart to another. The next morning, Jamie walked into school a little differently than he had before. His steps were still quiet, his shoulders still small, but his head was held a little higher. The patch now pinned to his backpack caught the light from the hallway windows, a soft shimmer with every step he took. It wasn't loud, it didn't need to be. It spoke in its own way. Students noticed it first. Some pointed, others whispered. But not like before. This time there was no laughter, no teasing, just curiosity, quiet respect. A few kids smiled at him in the hallway, and Jamie smiled back, not big, just enough to say he saw them too in the classroom. Mrs. Keene had written something new on the board. The words were simple and big enough for every student to read. Show up, speak softly, stand for something. She turned and met Jamie's eyes for a moment, and he gave her a nod. It wasn't just a message. It was a reminder at recess. Something else changed too. The same boy who once laughed when Jamie sat alone walked over slowly and dropped down beside him. He didn't say much at first, just stared at the ground, then finally muttered, "My dad's in the reserves." Jamie blinked, surprised. The boy added, "He doesn't talk about it, not ever." Jamie thought for a second, then said, "Maybe you could ask him sometime." The boy shrugged, but didn't get up. They sat there a while, not saying much but not needing tote lunch. A girl from another class slipped Jamie a small folded note. It was written in purple pen and had a smiley face at the bottom. Inside it said, "I think your patch is cool. And your dad's friend is even cooler." Jamie read it 3 times before tucking it into his pocket, like it was made of gold in the front office. Principal Alden sat behind his desk, staring at a blank memo sheet. His fingers tapped the surface. Slowly, beside him sat the event schedule for the rest of the school year. Quiet voices from the assembly still played in his mind. He thought of Mr. Gray's calm words, the way the students listened, and how the silence afterward meant more than any speech he could have given. After a few moments, He picked up his pen and started writing. He added a new section to the school calendar, Military and Service Appreciation Week. Under it he wrote, "Guest speakers welcome." And then, before placing the memo in the inbox, he added one final line in blue ink. Sometimes presence is the greatest lesson of all. Seasons passed, winter turned to spring, spring into summer. Jamie moved from one grade to the next, always carrying the same backpack, always keeping the patch. It grew worn. The threads frayed at the corners, but he never replaced it, never removed it. When the fabric tore, he stitched it by hand. When it faded, he pressed it gently with markers to bring the color back. By the time Jamie reached high school, he was taller, his voice deeper, but the patch still rested proudly on his bag. Some kids didn't know the story, others remembered, but no one asked him to explain it anymore. They just knew it meant something. And the day of his graduation, the gym was filled again, just like all those years ago. Only now Jamie stood at the front, wearing a black cap and robe, the same patch carefully pinned to the edge of his graduation stole. It didn't match the colors, but it belonged there as names were called and families cheered. Jamie waited for his turn. In the audience, Tanner sat in the second row, hands folded in his lap, eyes damp. The crowd felt big and noisy, but to him, it was all focused on one boy who used to sit alone and now stood tall when Jamie's name was called. He walked across the stage with quiet pride. He shook the new principal's hand, the one who was once a teacher that believed he deserved to be heard, and then stepped to the microphone to give his speech. His words were short, his voice calm and steady. "My father didn't raise me, and my mother left me too early," he began. "But someone showed up when I needed it most. He didn't wear a cape or shine in the spotlight. He just walked through a door and told me I mattered." He paused and looked into the crowd, his eyes finding Tanner. "He taught me that showing up is louder than shouting, stronger than medals, and deeper than words." Then Jamie raised his hand and gave a crisp, proud salute. Not loud, not theatrical, just real. The audience stood, not clapping wildly, but rising slowly, hand by hand, until every person was on their feet. Some wiped tears, others just stood quietly, the kind of silence that speaks volume. After the ceremony, Jamie met Tanner outside the gym. The sun was warm, the sky clear. Tanner looked at him with a smile that said everything. "You made her proud," he said simply. Jamie reached into his pocket and pulled out a new patch, this one stitched by hand, shaped like a flame with wings. He handed it to Tanner. "For the next kid," he said, "if you ever need it." Tanner nodded and tucked it into his coat. "I'll know when it's time." As they walked away, side by side, their shadows long behind them, the patch on Jamie's shoulder glinted in the sun, not as a symbol of sorrow, but as a badge of quiet strength. And somewhere in the halls of West Hill, on a whiteboard that hadn't been cleaned in weeks, a message remained: show up, speak softly, stand for something. And the echo of those words stayed long after the footsteps faded.